India was smallpox-free. This had been the hardest battle of all. The warriors could now smell victory. By 1977, the only cases being reported were in Somalia, in East Africa, mostly among nomadic families who were hard to track down.
Women in colorful dresses tend a cooking fire.
Later that year, 2 cases appeared in a group of nomads camped near the city of Merka.
On a dirt road, a man leads a family riding in a donkey cart.
The victims were children, and a smallpox volunteer, Ali Malmarlin, was sent to bring them to the Merka hospital. Ali himself had been vaccinated, so he didn't fear helping the children. By the time Ali reached them, one child was dying, but he helped the other survive. And anyone who had contact with the children was vaccinated, so there were no more cases. But then the unthinkable happened. Ali Marlin himself came down with smallpox.
Jason Weisfeld.
Ali was immunized, but he didn't have a take. So the immunization was not successful, and as a result, he was unprotected.
While Ali lay in bed fighting for his life, there were no other cases in Somalia or anywhere else in the world. Could the virus that had plagued millions for centuries finally be confined in just one human body in a remote hospital in Somalia?
For weeks thereafter, we held our breath.
Former smallpox campaign director Donald Henderson.
When Ali Marlin finally emerged from the hospital, little did he know that he would become the last victim of this terrible disease, the endpoint in a smallpox chain of person-to-person transmissions stretching back thousands of years. The warriors had won.
Donald Henderson.
I almost had the feeling like having been a soldier in a war, suddenly there was no war, and you'd miss the camaraderie of your colleagues working out there.
This was the greatest public health accomplishment to date. Yes, smallpox eliminated a disease from the world. That disease is no longer present.
David Heyman, World Health Organization.
The smallpox campaign gave global health leaders the optimism that they could take on any disease as long as they had a vaccine and the warriors to get it out. But smallpox would turn out to be the only worldwide success. And even before the applause had ended, a devastating new virus, HIV/AIDS, rose up to test global health and the power of vaccines as never before. Today, AIDS is on track to kill more people than smallpox, particularly in the disease's old breeding ground, Africa.
At night, car headlights shine on women bearing their legs in short skirts.
Sex workers looking for clients in Nairobi, Kenya. It could be any street in any city in Africa. And it's one of the important ways the AIDS virus is spread. Clients of these sex workers become infected and take the disease back home to their families.
Now in a doctor's office.
Charles Wachihi is a Nairobi doctor and an AIDS researcher.
Over 80% of the patients admitted to every hospital have HIV-related complications, ranging from diarrhea to chest infections to meningitis. You have all these people coming in and out, and then they come in and never go out.
In a cemetery, wooden crosses mark fresh graves.
AIDS has killed more than 20 million people, most here in Africa.
This is a sad place to be at. Most of the people buried here are between the ages of 20 and 30 years.
Charles Wachihi.
As a doctor, it does raise a lot of anxiety and confusion in a person, especially when most of the people who are dying are at the prime of their life.
Charles Wachihi knows the despair of doctors unable to heal their patients.
I had a friend in high school. He died when he was about 23 years old. He's a person you see, he's been sickly, he's getting weak, then a year later he's in the newspaper, obituary.
AIDS sufferers in the West can take powerful antiretroviral drugs that will keep the virus at bay. But in Africa, these medications are far too expensive for most Kenyans to afford. Ada Kadiga is an ordinary, hard-working woman who caught HIV from her husband who died of AIDS. She used to get free drugs from the hospital where she had a job, but now she's too sick to work and hasn't the money to buy drugs on her own. Dr. Susan Sadenbar has the task of allocating scarce AIDS drugs to her patients.
She meets with Aida.
Okay, so money for you is quite a struggle. Do you have any plans to raise the money so you'll be able to access the drugs?
No.
That is quite worrying.
I cannot sleep because I'm worrying too much how to keep the food on the table. I know that I'm now dying because I live by those drugs now.
So you'd actually feel now that is a death sentence, you're going to die.
Kadiga nods, then holds a teary gaze.
If any disease needs a vaccine, it's AIDS.
Charles Wachihi.
Africa is doomed without a vaccine. We have about 42 million infected throughout the world, and over 75% in Africa alone.
When AIDS first came on the scene 2 decades ago, I really expected 3 to 5 years we would have an effective vaccine. It's 20 years later, and we still don't have a vaccine.
Niels Dallaire, Global Health Council.
Over the last 2 decades, researchers have learned that making a vaccine for HIV is extremely difficult, because unlike other viruses, it destroys the immune system itself.
Computer animation shows a spiky green particle.
When HIV enters the body, antibody proteins that try and block it can't attach themselves to the surface of the virus, so it's free to invade any cell it chooses. And it chooses helper T cells, the source of the killer T cells that would normally fight any invading virus.
The HIV particle multiplies.
So with no killer T cells or antibodies to stop HIV, the virus keeps reproducing and overwhelms the entire immune system.
Now a man rolls a cart through a rural marketplace.
Scientists have always seen the destruction of the immune system as the main stumbling block to an HIV vaccine. In this vast Nairobi shantytown of 50,000 people, researchers have made a remarkable discovery, which they hope will lead to a vaccine. They found a group of 200 sex workers here in Pumwani who are naturally immune to AIDS.
In the marketplace, Dr. Wachihi wears a white lab coat.
Dr. Wachihi and his nurse Jean are part of an international team studying the AIDS-free prostitutes. One of them, Salome Simon, is starting her day. She's waiting for customers at the door of her house. By nightfall, she may have had 10 partners. Many will have HIV. Yet Salome has remained HIV-free.
I think I'm very lucky and I'm very happy because it's an astonishing way in which God has chosen me.
While Salome is totally free of HIV, Jennifer Wabui, another sex worker, has had the virus for 10 years, yet hasn't developed full-blown AIDS. Charles Wachihi and his researchers want to know what protects Jennifer from AIDS, and could this information be used to make a vaccine?
She is unique in that the immune system is constantly able to recognize HIV virus and continuously destroy it.
Jennifer Wabui.
A friend of mine, a woman who used to live with me, had AIDS and passed away. If I do get AIDS, that's my destiny.
But Africa's destiny may lie in understanding the special properties of Jennifer's blood. Halfway around the world, at Oxford University, another part of the research team has found that the Pumwani women possess an abnormally high number of killer T cells.
A microscopic image of cells.
This means their killer T cells haven't been destroyed by HIV. In fact, it's just the opposite. The prostitutes' killer T cells can actually destroy HIV.
In computer animation, an HIV particle vanishes.
They do this by targeting 2 HIV proteins that always move to the surface of an invaded cell. When this happens, that cell is destroyed, meaning the prostitute's immune system can defeat HIV. Researchers have now learned which genetic fragments of HIV produce these proteins and have begun to inject the fragments into volunteers. Although the fragments alone cannot cause AIDS, the team hopes that by putting them into a vaccine, they will spark the